Hello, everyone. I hope you are well as I find you in the middle of this eclipse portal. And it literally is pretty much a week from the last eclipse and a week to the next eclipse in which you find me filming this. And the first one was the Scorpio new moon eclipse. And the next one is going to be a total lunar eclipse in Taurus. And that will be on the 8th of November. And it won't be fully visible to everybody. So certainly in South Africa, we won't have that visibility. But for the places that are going to have it visible, it's going to have quite a long period of visibility. I'm going to share the chart so we can start looking at that, which will help with growing into your own astrology. So just to get an idea, this is set for South Africa, where I am. So don't worry about the houses. And if you get my free monthly newsletter, which you can subscribe for on my website, there'll be links below this. You will maybe have read the newsletter based around the concept of the houses and understanding what that means a little bit more, which is great. But in terms of this particular chart, I'm setting it for my area. So if you wanted to go and set it for your own space, then you would see where that was. But ideally, what you just do is you take it into your chart and you go, okay, well, if I have Scorpio rising, or Scorpio in the fifth house, or whatever the case may be, then this is going to impact that space in my life. So that's something that it's better to take the current transits and look at them in the context of your own natal chart. And I just feel like I really have this deep desire to help people use astrology in their daily lives, helping us to look forward and look back and see patterns and how we can mitigate and manage various things in our lives. And you don't have to be an astrologer to use astrology. I don't think any astrologer will ever know everything there is to know about astrology, because it is such a deep and complex language, and it's filtered down through many old traditions as well, so different cultural ideas. And even though they all start interlinking, which is so fascinating to see, before there was the internet or easy travel for people to just pop over and say, oh, well, how do you do it in your culture? There is still this correlation, which is quite remarkable. However, it's a huge language. There's spaces you can specialize. There's different schools of astrology. So what's best is if you start to understand your own natal chart, and then you look at things like this big eclipse and you go, how is that going to impact me? Where is that happening in my life? And this eclipse is going to be happening at 16 degrees of Taurus. Okay, I've blown this up, but I'm just going to shrink it for a second. So this little bull, this glyph here looks like a bull head with horns. That is the Taurus glyph. And here is the moon at 16 degrees, opposite the sun at 16 degrees of Scorpio. So we have that polarity that we've been speaking about, the Taurus-Scorpio polarity. And that is also where the eclipses have been happening for a little while now. And the nodes are at 13 degrees, which means that they move backwards, which means that they've still got a little bit of time in this axis. So this is where the eclipses are happening. This is almost like our biggest fated supercharged portals of when we were in looking more at the Scorpio side. It's what we're letting go of at the moment with the South Node, which looks like this. And in Taurus, the North Node, what we want to move towards. So the South Node is our karma, what we came in with, what we know, although in this case, it's not a birth chart. So it's the area of stuff that we know that we also need to now release what no longer serves us. And then the North Node is the Dharma, the potential, the forward momentum. And this particular eclipse is very close to the nodes. The last one, at 2 degrees of Scorpio, that's why it wasn't a complete eclipse. It was quite far from the actual nodes, whereas this one's only 3 degrees off. But this is a super charged eclipse because it is a full moon eclipse. Of course, that makes a difference. But also, a total eclipse, that's what I meant. It is a full moon eclipse, but it's also a total eclipse, not a partial eclipse, for those who can see it, and not everybody will. But what's very, very extra intensifying is that the moon is right with Uranus by degree. So Uranus, as we've spoken about Uranus so many times, is those shocking paradigm shifts. And so now we bring the moon, which is our emotional health, nourishment, nurturance, emotional intelligence, and we bring it to the shocking paradigm shifts. And we're going, okay, like what shocks and shifts need to happen to me on an emotional level in order for me to change what needs changing and move forward into a new way. And Uranus is really a futuristic planet. He desperately wants us to kind of be progressing forward. And sometimes it's like, I've got to burn that down, or you're going to just keep using that same rickety bridge and you'll never do the servicing until you fall. And so he's like, well, the bridge is coming down. Then opposing that, we have the sun, and full moon is always sun opposing moon, and that opposite opposing, polarizing kind of dynamic is a full moon thing always. And that's what makes it kind of intensified and grandiose. But this one also happens to have Mercury, the planet of how we think, the stories we speak, the words we say, and if you just think about the languaging you use for certain things, the stories that are continually coming out of your mouth, you keep saying things like, I'm so tired, or the world's going to hell in a handbasket, or nothing's getting any better, or if you know those kind of things, if we are saying them and saying them and saying them and saying them, then we're intensifying that as a reality. So Mercury is how we think, and he's in the intense Scorpio sign with the sun, deep thinking, deep diving, almost like feeling thinking, because Scorpio is water, so it's a deep feeling thinking kind of energy. So again, and opposing, of course, this is opposite Uranus. So Uranus is sitting with our emotional self, our moon, and saying, let's do something shocking, let's shift something. And opposing Mercury, saying, I'm going to throw something wild at you and see if that changes your perspective, see if that changes your mind. So not super comfortable, to be sure, but I think possibly extremely quick shifting, which I think is a positive. It doesn't always feel positive within the, in the transformational, transmutating phoenix fire space. It doesn't feel great, but it's much quicker to go like a phoenix, burn up, become ash and be reborn, than it is to be a butterfly who goes into a chrysalis, dissolves, turns into goop, takes this time to reform, break out of the chrysalis. So it's kind of like transformations happening anywhere you look at it, but this is almost an opportunity to do it in the fast and furious phoenixy way versus, and Phoenix is one of the totems of Scorpio, versus the slow, challenging transformation of butterfly or moth. So that's very intense. And we also still have Venus in Scorpio. So she's a few degrees off, but not many. She's only 4 degrees off the sun and moon. So she's also very much in this conversation, and she's been very involved for a while. And she's actually the ruler of Taurus. So she's the ruler of the moon, this particular moon. She's the ruler of the planets that are in Taurus at the moment. So that's also going to add to her strength. We kind of spoke about this, if I remember correctly, in my last forecast, when we said that Mars is ruling the new moon and Venus is ruling the full moon. So there is a strong Mars-Venus dynamic that's been going on a lot this year. And this year is a 6 year, which we're coming towards the end of numerologically. And the sixth tarot card is the Lovers in the Major Arcana, which again comes to that relational dynamic. And we've just got Mars having stationed retrograde, here he is, in Gemini, which is the card the Lovers often represents the sign of Gemini because of the 2. And Gemini Mars going retrograde is like, what do I do? Because Mars wants to move us forward, and he's now going, I don't know how. And if you think that Mars is actually ruling that Mercury in Scorpio, and Mercury is ruling Mars in Gemini. So there's this like, I don't know how to think differently. So how do I know how to act differently? I could do it this way, but I think that might be wrong. Or I think this is the new way, but maybe it's not. And there's this continual back and forth thing happening on many different layers of our psyche right now, which makes it quite hard to know which way to go. What is new? What is old? What do I keep from the old? What do I take into the new? So it's quite intense. And so that is definitely going to be something that will be playing in for a while. Mars has been sitting at 25 degrees for a while already. But one of the things that makes this particular, aside from all the strong oppositional energy between Taurus and Scorpio, which is obviously intensified being an eclipse as well, we have both Scorpio planets and the Taurus planets squaring Aquarius, which is where Saturn is. And literally it's 2 degrees, the sun and moon are 2 degrees off that Uranus, that Saturn. And Uranus-Saturn square is something we've been speaking about since the end of 2020, moving all through 2021 to now, where it's really getting the last juice out of this intense angle, a 90-degree angle, a square. It's a pressure point. It's squeeze you and see if you turn to dust or if you reform into a diamond. So it's really a powerful space that we've been playing in. And now the sun and moon have come to add their opinions to this whole thing, creating this intensified T square. So it's a very exciting full moon. Nobody in astrology, you can't say this is what will happen. I mean, it's going to be particularly strong for America because they're having some elections right now, so that's going to be super interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, also just to say one more thing is that Mars over here is also forming a square himself, kind of sitting in the middle here between Neptune and Jupiter, who's just moved back into Pisces. So there's also kind of like this like surreal, dreamy, ideal kind of bubbling beneath the surface that wants to be born, but Mars can't actually do anything about it yet because he's still feeling it out. He's still trying to re-story so that we find that we can hear those paradigms, those stories that we tell, and we go, no, that why do I keep saying that? Why do I even think that? How did I get to believe that? What is the root of this? And then often if you work it backwards, you know, it's just because my mother said and her mother said and her mother said before her. But actually, is that true for this day and age? Is that true for me? Is that true for me at a soul level? And oftentimes we'll be surprised that it's not true for us at all. And it then becomes releasing the habit, the habitual thinking that isn't even who you are. So it's really giving us an opportunity to undress in some ways those parts of ourselves. And interesting to say undress, if you know the myth of Inanna, which is when which likens to Venus's transition through to the underworld, which she's just been undertaking. She's starting to come out now, but as she goes down through the 7 gates or the 7 chakras, Inanna takes off a layer of clothing as she descends to the underworld. And I feel like in some ways that's what we're doing. I won't get into the myth now, but suffice to say, we're undressing and unclothing these parts of ourselves that have felt right, but maybe they weren't right at all. They just felt right because that's what society said. That's what our parents told us. That's what our friends expected. That's what our lover wanted. Now we have the opportunity to strip ourselves bare and see what do we want to keep from this and what do we want to let go of. So I think that is the major essence of what I wanted to cover for this moon. I'm going to stop the share. And yes, hopefully this has been helpful for you. I will put links to all of my things below. I would love if you like, share, follow, subscribe, and sign up on for my mailing list. And it would be wonderful to get some feedback. So thank you so much for watching, and good luck with this full moon. See you on the other side.